Well, a very good morning to everyone from Elation headquarters here in Redwood Shores in California. My name is Jonathan Bruce, Vice President and Field CTO of Elation. Delighted to have some great participants in our discussion today. This is going to be a bilateral conversation between Ankit and Nitin, but we also welcome your comments, your questions, your feedback. Please leverage the Q&A tab here on this webinar if you have any questions as we can continue our conversation over the next 45 minutes or so. So again, welcome. Without further ado, let's do a round of introductions. Now, by no particular order here, we're going to go as a function of how the pictures are organized on my screen here. So Ankit, if you wouldn't mind giving a quick introduction, tell us a little about yourself, maybe a fun fact too. I didn't say I would ask that. But I think anything we should know about you, and of course, where in the world you are as well.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you to CDO Magazine for having me, and excited for this webinar today. So good morning, everyone. I'm Ankit Goel. I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at KeyBank. KeyBank, we're based out of Cleveland, and as my background shows, we're celebrating our bicentennial this year. So we're a 200-year-old company that we are very proud to be celebrating this year, continuing to serve our clients and communities. I'm responsible at KeyBank for the enterprise level data and analytics function. So I have the strategy, governance, metadata management, as well as the execution aspects. So I have the data lake environment and the execution of that within my role as well as then the analytics tools. And I've been in the financial industry my whole career. So again, excited to be here. In terms of the fun fact, let's see, I'm a big foodie, so I have multiple grills, and if I'm not working, then I'm coming up with what to cook either outside or inside. So I love experimenting with new things.
Yeah, well, you'll have to come over to my place, but from my grill receives lots of complaints, so I definitely need your help. So we'll come back to that. And Nitin, over to you. You're joining us from Marriott International. A little bit about you, where in the world you are, and of course a fun fact, and we'll get into some of the content here.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining in, and I believe this is a great platform to be on and kind of share your thoughts and kind of learn as well. So a little bit about myself. So I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. So if you are here, let me know. We can grab a cup of coffee or beverage of your choice. And I have around like 2 decades of IT experience. And then I was in AI for the last 1 decade. And currently, I am actually working as a director of data science and Gen AI at Marriott International, where our team kind of supports around 35 plus brands. And we kind of try to solve the business problems across the board, be it on the legal side, customer care, sales. And we kind of solve it either through a traditional data science practice as well, or we kind of see if the large language models can be a good fit to solve those problems. So it kind of broad spectrum of problems that we have. And about a fun fact. So initially I thought I used to be a very good pool player, but I kind of taught my kid, and then last week he beat me miserably, and I kind of wrong about myself. I thought like I was a great player, but he beat me like 7-0 or something.
I love it. That's great. All right. Well, let's get into some of the content, everyone. So today we're gathering to talk about what it is to build trusted AI through what I think is a sense of AI precision agents. I think we can all recognize that the AI world is evolving faster than I think anybody quite imagined. Certainly in my own career, I've lived through several kind of revolutions of write once, run anywhere, when I spent time working on Java at Sun Microsystems, the big data era. But this kind of AI moment we find ourselves now, I think is really a tidal wave. I think it's also important to note that it's not necessarily a one size fits all. AI does not necessarily kind of work for the immediacy and the complex needs of today's enterprises. And I think we need to make sure that we can put AI into the right spot whereby they can understand the context and make the kind of key decisions that they want for the consumers that we see. So what we're going to do today is really kind of explore a set of new approaches to what it is to conceive, build, and sustain AI agents. And we're going to talk about what are the kind of systems we should think about and processes and practice to help move beyond static tools that act more like and get to a point where these agents are working like more true digital partners. And I think getting to a point whereby these agents can combine the precision of trusted data and the ability to adapt to kind of core business goals is going to be really, really key. So, let's kind of kick it off here. And Ankit, if I can start with you, let's kind of get your perspective. What is this kind of one size fits all, problem? Why do you think these kind of are falling short of, from your perspective, the kind of enterprise? Certainly talk from your own perspective from a key bank. That's also fine too.
Yeah, no, Jonathan, great question. As I thought about this, right, overall, the one size fits all doesn't work for AI because it doesn't quite work for any other technology as well, right? When you look at any big corporation, there is so much around what is already in place there. If you were starting fresh tomorrow, then sure, we could have a template and we could repeat that for that company. But all of us are living organisms in some ways. We have different sets of legacy technologies that are important and need to be connected into. And for agents to work, it's about connectivity across an end-to-end process. So they have to be able to connect to different set of technologies, different set of APIs. The maturity of each company on their data governance journey is unique as well. So all of that has to be taken into consideration as you plan your AI journey.
How about a precision, Ankit? I mean, what does that mean for the potential application of these agentic kind of outcome focused things in their ability to actually deliver to the promise that I think some of the executive teams that at least I interface with have? How important is that in your view?
Can you say more about, you said precision?
Correct.
Yeah, so I think as I think about the promise of AI, and I think even Gartner puts it, it's going through the trough of disillusionment in some ways. I think it really comes down to, as you think about, if it's AI and I think you said it really well earlier, right? It has to be the digital partner versus just a productivity tool. Because while it remains as a productivity tool, then it's very hard to measure ROI. And that's when the executive teams start to get disappointed because they're expecting to see some bottom line savings or revenue growth. So when it comes to that agentic aspect of it, it really has to, the precision piece comes in on what's that end-to-end business process that you're going after. So it's not so much about AI, it's more about what's that business strategy, business problem that we're solving for. And then AI is just another tool in the toolbox to solve for it.
Yeah, we'll get back to the kind of business transformation piece as well. But I think, Nitin, to you, let's kind of double click on this digital partner component. So I think there's a ton of what I would call lazy journalism going around, whereby there's a kind of scaremongering as to what this world would mean. But what's your view of how you think executives that should think about AI as that digital partner to kind of allow for many enterprises to deal with they have to from a regulatory perspective, but also to move forward in some of the more opportunistic use cases. And I think certainly from your perspective, I mean, I would imagine, think a ton about that customer journey through all your different brands and your properties. And I speak as a long-standing Marriott customer as well. What does that mean in terms of how your executives are thinking for what that can do for your business downstream?
Yeah, so I think we have to understand, right? Like the digital partners, right? So I always call that as a digital companion or a digital twin of our associates, right? And most companies nowadays, right, they used to think like the AI is like a screwdriver, which is like handy and easily available and just another tool in the toolbox. But what you need, that's not be the future, right, for us, right? The future would be that you need a partner which can actually understand the context right? Because every company is kind of unique its in own ways, because they have different customers, they have different policies, they have different rules. So this digital companion or a partner will understand the context of you, right? Like, what your company is, what your values are, what tools you have, and everything. And then this actually be able to take initiatives as well, right? That means it's just not sit idle and waiting for your command like a tool to actually say, oh, do this, rather than it can actually understand the journey of the customer and then be able to kind of respond, or maybe being a very proactive as well, rather than being a reactive, right? So think about this, right? Like a customer sends an email, right, which is like that the customer has a problem and they send an email. So and then you kind of respond. So it's a very reactive approach, right? Whereas if you have this digital companion who kind of work 24 cross 7, and it kind of, understanding and scanning through the data every second, and then, hey, it kind of make a prediction that, hey, something is right for this customer. Let me just be a proactive, maybe kind of let the customer care know, or even kind of proactively sends an email to the customer as well. So it can actually take initiatives. And then I think we all have to kind of ensure that people does not feel that it's us versus the AI. It's an operation, right? So it's like we have to work with the AI, because there is no way either of these can survive on their own. So we kind of have to work together in a more collaborative way. So the more we kind of build the system with trust, the better adaptability we can see. And then these partners or the digital twins can actually be more useful and be more giving you more time to actually work on things that really matters, rather than kind of doing the monotonous or kind of the work which may not add value to the customer journey, I would say.
Yeah. So specifically in your world, give me a sense of how these executives are thinking. Are there any particular metrics that they are holding feet to fire, I guess, on in terms of how they feel these digital partners are going to most likely have a net positive effect? Any sense of that you could share, particularly in the kind of business that you operate in, which is highly customer orientated, thinking about occupancy rates, all the kind of key kind of things you want to make sure you will deliver upon? Any sense of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think so we kind of have on our customer care, right? So which is like a main organization which is forefront for the customers to intake all of those, right? So now the kind of metrics is depending on the problem that we are trying to solve through, right? So it could be a speed or a quality or like a trust, right? So when I say speed, like whether you are actually be able to use these digital companions to solve the business queries, right? If they, for example, if they sends an email, whether you are able to respond and be able to solve that problem in the first interaction itself, right? Like the first time response time, and be able to solve that then and there, rather than you are kind of doing a follow-ups or sending, oh, sorry for the inconvenience, something didn't work out correctly, all of those. So it kind of depend on the problem that we are trying to solve, but overall I would say the speed, the quality, the response that it's generating, whether it's kind of is accurate. And then obviously the other part is the trust, right? Like whether these digital partners that you have are able to cite like what policies, what documents it's kind of using it, and then kind of responding back to the customer. So I think all of these, the trust, the speed, and the quality are kind of key when you are actually implementing these. And one thing I think everyone should be kind of focused on is making sure that you have a good logging of these of these actions, of these digital partners action, because you can learn a lot, and then you kind of have to put on the guardrails, which is like the most important aspect of any autonomous agentic solutions, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's an audit trail that we're going to get back to there. That's really interesting. So, Ankit, to you, I think about there's an important role that many of the kind of leadership perspectives have. So, in terms of ensuring that these agentic kind of processes are trustworthy, what's the kind of role that you see as a leader in your world in trying to navigate both the regulatory minefield that you have to operate in, and balancing that against the kind of more opportunistic use case as well. What's the kind of role of trust and confidence in your perspective here?
Yeah, I think it has a huge role to play, right? And that's where it starts to connect in with some of your data and analytics governance practices as well. And that's how I'm viewing it, is that ultimately, and I know this is the cliche that keeps going around with like bad data leads to really bad AI, but it is true, because at the end of the day, if we just look at that continuum of whether it's a simple report in Excel to a dashboard to a analytics metric to machine learning to Gen AI, in that continuum, it is all driven by data. And at the end of the day, either you're able to provide high quality data to the consumers who are going to build this analytics or AI, or they have to know that it's use at your own risk. And then they have to implement the controls before they use the data to know, where did it come from? Can I rely on it? What checks should I be testing before I do it? So I think the way we're thinking about it is that knowing where is our trusted data within the company, has it gone through all the right checks and balances? How do we connect that into the concept of AI ready data that is, again, becoming a term in the industry? That's the way I'm starting to define it. So I do think trust and governance are a huge aspect between AI and the data connectivity. I think the second part I'll just call out is that beyond just the connection with data governance, there is also an aspect of how are you governing the AI itself. So as I say, you need to, if you're baking a cake, you need to make sure you got the right raw materials, but then you can still burn the cake. So just the best quality flour and sugar and eggs doesn't guarantee a good cake. So what is that governance then on that final product as well? And what we are really working on right now defining is, being in a bank, we have our 3 lines of defense, and each line of defense has a specific role to play. That's what we're in the middle of defining, is what is then the role of a first line governance function versus a second line risk oversight. What does each party do? And that's, I think, a healthy balance there is important for scalability and for trustworthiness.
Yeah, let's talk about scale a little bit too as well. I think one other pattern that I've observed is kind of a almost a renaissance in the kind of long established data mesh model, where data mesh always had that intentionality of helping move to a point whereby the onus of data management wasn't exclusively on the data management teams. You get to a point whereby you're changing that onus such that the business and the subject matter experts can actually own the data and own that life cycle and that trust and that governance, often to going down the path of kind of data productization as well, which I think is really interesting as well. We're seeing that certainly a lot for many of the conversations that I have as well. Well, how important is the driving that accountability of ownership in your world, Ankit, particularly in the regulatory world as well? And I'd love, as you kind of think about that, as in terms of, in a sense, the regulatory work you have to do in these multiple kind of lines of defenses you describe around governance is what you have to do. How do you balance that against some of the things that you really want to do, those more opportunistic use cases as well?
Yeah, no, that's the multiple questions in what you just said. So
yeah, no, I have a habit of doing that. I apologize.
No, all good. I'll try and answer all of them. So I think the first part here is going back to that whole concept of data mesh and the importance of ownership of data by the business. I feel that is a foundational aspect of any good data governance model. And I've been in this role at Key for the last 2 years, and that was the first one of the operating principle items that we put down, that we need to have there are 3 roles in my mind, which is the role of the data owner or the person who produced the data. They know best what they wanted to create. Did they actually create what they wanted to create? So that is someone in the business process who really did that customer transaction and designed that product. You then have the custodian, who I call the truck driver, right? They're taking the good quality data and moving it to wherever it needs to go. And they have to make sure they don't damage the product while it's in transit. And then you have the consumer, who's the user of the data, regardless of what they're doing with it, whether it's a dashboard or AI. They need to make sure, again, like I said, they're putting their checks in place that they produce the right quality product. And I think that is just foundational for a data mesh to work, or even as we think about scaling AI.
And do you see a moment where that's typically centralized in such that those standards can be adhered to? What's the enforcement path for that?
So I strongly believe, I think there is it's a hub and spoke model is what I believe has the highest chances of success. I've seen the pendulum swing in the last several years on companies tend to go centralize everything, and then you become a bottleneck because the moment you centralize, you cannot scale at the speed of each individual line of business. Then you swing it all the way to the other end and you federate it out and you say, well, everybody police yourselves. Well, then we know what happens. There's inconsistency, lack of standardization. And as you mentioned, regulatory environments, our regulators and risk partners like consistency because then they can see everybody's following the same rule book. So if you federate it out, then everybody comes up with their own rule book and don't have common language. So that hub and spoke model, somewhere in the middle, that's what I have been working on setting up. Is that you can define the standards and the rules centrally, but you still maintain the ownership where it belongs, and you teach them the responsibilities that they all need to do. But then you hold them accountable from a central seat.
Yeah, it's what I call it's the right mix of carrot and stick. I mean, reflecting on that, Nitin, does that kind of fit your world too, where that hub and spoke model, the right mix of carrot and sticks, where you're able to create an environment where there's a degree of accountability around data, but in a sense, that accountability drives a greater adoption of the standards that you want to see, certainly around governance and trust. How does that? What's that journey been like for you in your world? And I think it'd be great to get even if there's a journey still underway there too.
Sorry, Jonathan, I kind of lost you for like a few seconds.
No problem. I'll re-emphasize. So just to kind of echo on what Ankit was talking about here in terms of your world and Marriott, how important has that kind of journey to change the accountability of ownership of the data been in your world, at least in terms of kind of helping drive that sense of leadership around trust and the inherent confidence you need to establish for some of these AI decision-making processes to actually become more real?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I kind of agree what Ankit was mentioning about, right? So I think like people or the company are very focused on the AI part, right? But we kind of, undermine the power of the data engineering teams, right? Because they are the one who kind of doing all the hard work or the heavy lifting for us, right? And I kind of had like we kind of also have the similar thought on like centralized the or policing the enterprise level rules, and then the individual teams can actually have their own data, but everything has to have their own metadata as well, so that you kind of backtrack it in the sense that where the data is coming from, how fresh this is, and then what it means. And then you kind of have the guardrails around who can modify the data, what policies to apply for, who to escalate and what to block, all of those things. I think kind of, and then once you have the high quality of the data, then you kind of actually be able to build the solutions which your customers, your associates can trust on, right? Because if think about this, right? If I can make a chatbot now, right, which we can easily do it in like maybe a day, right? Now, if the chatbot is not able to quote that, okay, which policy or which data source it kind of, used to answer that, I mean, all of these are like non-deterministic, right? So how do you enforce a deterministic solution out of it, right? So you have to have that whole data lineage, and then metadata kind of is important, and then kind of you'll be able to produce a product which is like trusted by the customers, because you kind of be able to say, if anyone or regulators kind of question you that, okay, why did you make that decision, you kind of backtrack, hey, it made because it kind of find these chunks of information from these policy versions, and then it kind of applied these rules on top of it, and then it kind of come to that conclusion.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You both said something I think that totally resonated with me. It's like the new war right now is over the metadata, right? And I think you can see, various different larger players in the industry, like Salesforce buying Informatica, or ServiceNow buying Data.World, or there's a real awakening, I think, in terms of that the metadata really, really, really matters here. So I think that to me is the new non-negotiable, right? It's like that's where strong governance needs to kind of take place. And I think, and Nitin, you mentioned the notion of lineage data provenance. Let's kind of explore that a little bit as well. I think it's a highly specialized component. Talk to me a little more about what data provenance and lineage means for you in terms of that downstream impact. And maybe if you could kind of maybe explore what you are using lineage for in terms of, who are the personas in your world that are most consuming, are most conscious of data lineage in terms of the kind of tasks they are pursuing. Could you dig into that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the data lineage, especially in terms of this AI world, right, is kind of is very important. And I think even because the data is like a new fuel, right? And any decision that you're making, it's kind of based on the data, right? And if you kind of not be able to backtrack it, then you'll not be very confident about the decisions that you are making. So data lineage is like, every company should kind of focus on, and that's what we are also focusing on, building the solutions where we kind of easily backtrack, where the data is coming from, who is modifying it, what are the quality, the completeness, all of those things. And then now I think like all of our downstream systems are kind of relying on that, be it on the data science side, be it on the agentic or the Gen AI side as well, because like I was mentioning earlier, like if you have the chatbot and it kind of does not able to answer or it kind of does not tell you like what's the reasoning behind that, then it's a problem, right? So now I think given the agentic world we are in, we have to be very focused on that, building that metadata for all of those. And it's kind of the key for any solution that we are building on. So I mean that's I think it's like building something which you kind of easily backtrack it, and then that kind of creates the trust of it.
Yep, very good. So Ankit, from your perspective, what does lineage mean for you? And as you think about this, I'm going to package another question, as you know I will. Think about what are the kind of KPIs that would mean in your world in terms of ensuring you have a perspective on that data provenance, both upstream and downstream, in terms of the key use cases you are thinking through here.
Yeah, and I actually want to react to one thing you said earlier about the importance of metadata. And it's one of those things where all of us on the call as data professionals, right? I wonder if we can at some point say, I said so to our management teams, because for the last decade, we've been saying metadata management is so important, but it was like, well, we don't have any money or importance for it now. But now it's become a fire drill, because without a good semantic layer, which is based on metadata, AI doesn't work. So
I think you're exactly right. Or in fact, if without that, I would almost prefer to say that without the right strong metadata context, AI agents are failing, frankly, to deliver on their promise. They become just mere toys, frankly, without it. So that's at least what I see it. Love to kind of.
So going back to the lineage question, and Jonathan, I did lose you for a few seconds, but I'll just go back to that lineage question, where the way I think about lineage is, if we actually forget data for a second, right? All of us as consumers, when I think about metadata and lineage, it's like going to a grocery store and buying a box of cereal. Would you buy that box of cereal now if there was no nutrition facts and ingredients on it? Right. So that is your metadata. And you want to be able to rely that if they're saying it's 10 grams of fiber and 15 grams of sugar, that's actually accurate, versus, well, that's what I guessed it has. I don't know how much it actually has. So
it's a function of trust, that you have to believe what you read on that label, right? That's
exactly
what we hope the FDA is doing for us,
Yeah, and then lineage really comes into play when you're actually then buying that and bring it home. I know many of the grocery stores, I love to shop at Wegmans, and I know they're really good at this, is I would get that phone call saying, well, our records show you bought this thing from us last month. Please throw it away because we have just been told there was a contamination of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
So the lineage that's really lineage, right? They need to know where did they buy it from and when and who bought it from them. So when there is a recall, you can actually connect all the dots and that's the experience we expect in our daily lives. I think that's what lineage does in a corporation, is that going back to my tri-party agreement of who created the data, who moved it, and then who used it. If you don't have lineage, at least for your most critical data in the company, then when things go wrong, how do you find out? Like then it becomes a phone a friend network, and you find out either too late. If it's a regulatory filing, you either find out after you've done it that something was wrong, and then it's too late, or
Yep.
you have someone who's like, I had a typical technology batch job fail, and the data is bad. Who all care about, like, how do I tell them that data is bad? Well, I don't know who will use my data. So I think lineage really becomes practical for those purposes on connecting these dots. And the way we've done it at Key right now is where we cannot boil the ocean. You cannot have lineage on everything just because it is too hard, right? It is the hardest problem to solve. So we are taking a risk-based approach on starting with our most critical data and making sure that has lineage, and then kind of going down that risk spectrum.
Yeah, I would imagine certainly in your world, it's about catching bad actors, catching fraud, catching kind of, improper utilities and, those that are potentially violating your kind of service contracts as well.
Yeah.
I love the Wegmans example. I think it's I think for us all, ultimately, we are here, helping our enterprises kind of do great things with their data. But if that can have a downstream effect in changing the customer's behavior in a positive way, right? So I think the Wegmans example is perfect. That drives a set of behaviors that I think is super interesting as well, because they develop, those consumers, a sense of trust. I would imagine, Ankit, as a foodie, as you describe yourself, you're probably going to think about going back to Wegmans because they were able to catch something for you. That's the kind of behavior we all want to see with our customers down the line.
Exactly.
So let's kind of pivot a little here. And I remind everybody, we've got some great participants here online. Please feel free to send us Q&A. We'd love to kind of get some random questions here, and, happy to kind of, take a couple of grenades as well. So let's kind of look a little beyond from where we are today. So let's kind of think about 3 to 5 years from now. AI agents, I think in 3 to 5 years' time, are going to be in every aspect of what we do in terms of data management, in terms of conception, conceiving new products, how we serve our customers. What's the role that you see, Nitin, in your world 3 to 5 years right now? And feel free to be bold here. This is not necessarily something that is actual being planned for, but I think it's interesting for the audience to get a sense of what we think our ambitions are where they're going to lead us down the line.
In the next 5 years, we'll all be sitting on a beach drinking our margarita, and every other agent is kind of doing everything for us.
There'll be a bear agent. I like it. Yeah, okay, I can go with this. Okay.
Yeah, but I think on a serious note, I think there in the next 3 to 5 years, we kind of going to see a lot more change, right? And it's not just going to be the science project. It kind of being touching all the fabrics of every business, right? So we kind of think that in each and every system, in each and every business process, we kind of have these agents kind of embedded, right? For example, on the customer care, handling the emails, or on a voice, it kind of guiding the associates, or on the marketing side, it kind of generating the content or kind of doing the translation. So you kind of be able to see, in each and every process, these agents will be kind of embedded. And then, the companies are actually go away from experimenting. They kind of start trusting these systems, right? Because right now it's still, people are a little hesitant about trusting these agents, right? Because of its non-deterministic nature. But as we kind of getting more and more mature, we'll be able to, like, the companies will be able to trust more and more. And only agents, I would say, you'll be seeing down the line, which are, kind of, wrapped around by the solid governance, the transparency, and the guardrails, right? Only those kind of agents will be able to, sail through in that. And then once you kind of have these agents take the time to, or kind of taking away the non-productive work from the associates, then you kind of like, you'll see a lot of creative ideas, creative processes, and then the associates or the companies kind of will be able to tailor their solutions so that, they kind of delight the customers, because the agents or the companies will be focusing on things which really matter to the customer rather than actually just doing the operational things.
Yeah, I like that. Ankit, from your perspective, I think, what's your perspective here? 3 to 5 years, what's that role going to evolve to? And I'm particularly interested to get a sense of how you feel that will be an assist to how you operate as a bank as the regulatory environment continues to evolve, or as you grow as an entity and are exposed to different regulatory kind of standards as well. Balancing that against, how you want to, take your customers on a net new journeys, right, to drive loyalty and drive kind of, a deeper adoption of the various different products you want to bring to market.
Yeah, I think the way, the first thing I wanted to say was anybody who, including myself, thinks who's predicting next 3 to 5 years is wrong, because last year, this time, we didn't even say the word agent, and now we cannot finish a sentence without the word agent. So things have happened that none of us were expecting. So this is, and that just confirms how fast this is evolving. And this is, for the companies that don't adopt this and don't going to transform with this, will become the blockbusters of the world, right? I do truly believe that in some ways. I think as I think about the industry as a whole, I do think this would be kind of like, now we expect everywhere we go, or every company that we interact with, we expect they have an app, right? It's not just a mobile website. We expect there's an app for that, and that you can do some quick actions on the app. I think the agentic experience really will be that, which is, as humans, we're getting more and more impatient. We want answers now. And I was going to joke with Nitin that I just stayed in a Marriott earlier this week, and I was trying to request late checkout, but I had to go wait in the line, talk to the front desk, and get that. I'm like, that's a very simple thing. I should be able to talk to an agent, say, I have status. Can I get late checkout? They check some things and say approved, and do it, right? So,
and moreover, that experience should be consistent. I was in Toronto last week and had the similar experience. I too had to stand in line. I was like, why can't I do this on my phone? Right. So yes, Nitin, you're getting a hard time, but I definitely appreciate that.
I'm just taking the notes. I think.
Yeah.
We just gave you a business case there. But so I think that's where, in some ways, there will start to become an expectation from the consumers that we are getting across the board that experience. Now, when I connect that to the banking industry, as we've seen with other technology adoptions as well, I think just given the amount of the aspect of being a regulated industry, and regulation is not bad, right? Regulation is good. That it's there to protect us as consumers, because we are entrusting these banks with our money, and so we want to make sure there are good guardrails around it. I think the banking industry will be clearly is already in this space, but I think the speed at which the consumers will maybe experience it will be likely slower than what you see in the more of the consumer industry in some ways, right? Because fine, if I requested the late checkout and it was the agent messed it up, okay, the risk is low. Fine, you have an unhappy customer, you could compensate for that, you can get by it. But if the agent on the other side wrongly adjusts someone's credit limit, that could expose the bank to credit risk, or lowers the credit limit. Now you're trying to buy something and you're getting blocked because the agent just took the wrong action.
Or in your world, taking on too much risk that could be systemically very detrimental to the health of your business, right?
Exactly. And so I do think, as we think about the next 3 to 5 years, banks like us will definitely, and we are already in the middle of this, is looking at AI, looking at agents on how do we make our internal processes more efficient, which ultimately lead to a better client experience. but that direct interaction of our customers with the agent, I think that's likely a few steps removed while we make sure, again, the risk is appropriately managed and that trust and that we can internally first trust it fully before we expose it further.
Yep, great. So we have some questions coming in here. So, and it just says we're like 8:40 here in California. I'd love to kind of bring some of these questions to life here. So this one's from Dinesh. I'm just going to read it out directly. What are your thoughts with regards to return on investment, with regards to data lineage and metadata? In his opinion, the facets of data management required from a technical standpoint, how would you connect the specific tangible to those various specific tangible business impacts? What output metrics have you driven? So maybe, Ankit, I could start with you in this regard. You haven't talked much about the lineage component. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think maybe the ugly truth in this, unfortunately, is that it is very hard to build a business case, and which is why when I joked about it earlier, for the last decade, as we've all been trying to build a business case, we are able to make some level of progress, but it really starts to be more fluff in some ways on how do you actually put ROI. So you do need a good crisis in this case to kind of help, or you need some of those lemons to make the lemonade out of it, which is when you have an issue that's happening where, let's say, you had a very critical either model or regulatory report or something that is driving the company's strategy that can actually have a financial impact. And you get to the point where that is either wrong or you suspect it is wrong. And now you're spending days of multiple people's time to figure out, is it actually wrong? How do I confirm it's wrong? Where do I trace it back to? I think you have almost, that's what I've seen is that, unfortunately, and it's not the best answer, but you need some of those to start using those to build the business case to say, this is how much time that was spent to actually investigate this issue, fix the issue, what might have been the reputational impact, or maybe even other impacts from it, and how do you avoid that? So it becomes a risk mitigant, risk avoidance versus a true ROI business case, unfortunately.
Yeah, so Nitin, to you, and I think we'll wrap in the additional question we have here. Let's kind of get to some specifics in your perspective. How then do you are you able to kind of drive in this regard to kind of ensure how you make that connection to data management to some of the business impacts that you want to drive as well? What's in your experience, what you have seen that's worked and also not worked?
Mm-hmm. So I think Ankit kind of covered a lot of ground on that, but two things, right? So I think a few years back there was a paper from Google, right, where about the ML, life cycle, and they kind of introduced a term called the tech debt, right? When you're actually building the ML solution, the ML part is very less, but the overall peripherals things that you're gonna be doing, it's kind of huge. So I think now, similar on those concepts, right? So we also have to think the data debt as well, right? Because the data debt means like now a lot of leadership are actually, thinking about in those lines, the data debt, which means that, you have to keep on investing on your data. And then, be it on the lineage or be it in the quality, the completeness, everything. And it's and to Ankit's point, right? It's very hard to kind of map a business case around it. But now I think a lot of companies are understanding the quality aspect of the data. And since they understand that the quality aspect, they are actually willing to invest on the data itself. So it's comparatively, I would say, a little easier to have the business case compared to say 5 years ago. So I think in like as long as you are able to justify the ROI of the final product, and then kind of map it on how much of that product kind of rely on the good quality of the data, like in terms of say what is the company stake, I would say, if anything goes wrong in that product, right? So if, let's say if I build a like Ankit was saying, right, like the credit limit itself, right? If I kind of build something which kind of overshoot or undershoot the credit limit, it's gonna be costing a lot of money to the company, right? So if I can actually build a system of or high quality data that kind of reduce the impact of that, I kind of be able to translate that and kind of make a good use case around that. We have to spend time on the quality of the data.
Yep, love it. So Ankit, I think I'm going to do a bit of a pivot here. I think we've talked a lot about the technology, the concepts of agents, data mesh, metadata. I think that's also going to think about, what are the kind of sort of cultural and or workforce transformations that need to happen too, right? So in your world, what are the kind of journeys, the change management perspectives you're going through as well? And often I kind of think it kind of goes into the three buckets of people, process, technology. We've talked a bunch of the technology. Can you maybe explore a little more about the people process perspective that I think we need to get to for, to kind of help our audience understand that, there's not one size that fits all. Let's kind of dig into your experiences here.
Yeah, I think that the people side of it is likely one of the most important equations in this, right? And I think the change management it goes in a few different ways. I'm a big believer in that people change. I personally look at that I have a whole team dedicated to it, even as part of our data journey, because and I'll start with data and then get into AI, because even as over the last 2 years, as I've been trying to put in a new data operating model and refreshing our data strategy, one of the important aspects was how do we make sure everyone across the company knows that good quality data is part of everyone's job, not just my team as a centralized governance function or a strategy function. It is everyone's job. And sometimes it is hard where in a bank, when you have people in a business area and they're doing deals or they're doing interacting with our customers, they're like, well, I'm doing the transaction. There's no data per se in it, but really everybody is either creating data or modifying data or moving data. So we actually recently did an enterprise-wide data management training, a very simple 15-minute training, just to use different personas to make that connection for everyone on how, starting from our colleagues who are in the branches interacting with our customers to all the way to someone in a back office function, we're interacting with data every single day, and that we all have a responsibility, even if it is just like stopping and asking, like, who gave me this data? Should I rely on it? Like, did they tell me it's good quality or not? So that really starts that culture change. And then as we think about AI, we've been very focused on that as well, that as we launched, for example, Microsoft Copilot for many of our, colleagues within the company, we're trying to make sure, again, it's one thing to just give it and say, well, we expect everybody will use it and you'll get the benefit from it, versus the way we've also done it is how do we make sure we're driving everyone to be educated on how to best use it. And sometimes that is training, but sometimes it's actually sharing examples from others. So we've done that in my team, where in our last team meeting, we brought up actually a few individuals who've used Gen AI in different ways and how they actually went about doing it. We shared those as stories to prompt others to start thinking about how do you actually truly start adopting this and get ready for this future that is inevitable in some ways.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We have another question here from Shubha, who says, do you see any resistance from any business areas or departments on the adoption of AI? I think that's part of what you're getting at here. I think part of how we all can help, modulate that resistance and address that is that I wonder also is that, do you see a moment, Ankit, where you're going to take something away and replace it with some of these kind of more prompt-based type conversations? And there are some, not necessarily conversations, but I think there's a sense in the enterprise world that this is a huge potential threat or potential impact to your traditional BI interfaces as well. People feel that much more empowered to kind of interface and interact in and explore, be curious with their data in a way they could not do before because they have that much more flexibility in these kind of chat interface. What's your sense there, Ankit?
Yeah, so we've actually not seen any resistance, just to answer that specific question in the chat, right? So we've actually been seeing a lot of excitement across the company, where it is really more around tempering that excitement is around the risk discussion on what is the ROI, what is the risk as part of the use case, how do we balance both of those and make sure we're also not doing 24 things at the same time, right? Because this does take up a lot of energy and resources, and if you don't prioritize, then it can become a drain on capacity as well. So that's kind of answering the question. But Jonathan, to your part on, as I and I'm now blanking on the question, I apologize. So I think you asked about, do you mind repeating it?
Yeah, no, it was about the some of the kind of reluctance that you see out there in terms of, how do you what was this? I think it was a question in terms of that some of the resistance that you see out there, in fact, of that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember now. So I think the other part that you asked was around how will it actually end up impacting, or does it eliminate something potentially? And I think there's a lot of chatter around it. There's obviously different companies out there that have spoken to the fact that this would eliminate certain types of roles potentially. I think the way, at least I see it right now, this is not necessarily representing the bank. This is just Ankit's personal view, that some of that shifting will naturally happen. But where I see the way I'm implementing it right now, and I'll connect it back to Lineage, for example, that we have as part of our data lake, in our conformed layer, which is that middle section of a medallion architecture, right? That is where we have a lot of business logic. And it is to do the lineage there, we would need either a small army of people to deck against, who are not doing that today. So we need to hire net new capacity for someone to trace through the code, figure out how the data is moving to actually truly come up and do the lineage. Or we could apply Gen AI against it and see if we can feed the ETL logic and the other, DDLs and other aspects of the data layer to see if Gen AI could help us explore that lineage much more efficiently. So that, in a way, we didn't eliminate a role, we just attacked the problem in a much more efficient manner. And I think that's where at least my initial focus is. And like I said, even earlier, how this evolves over the next couple of years, we all have to kind of wait and see on how much is it making us all efficient versus and which jobs would actually evolve from what they do today to something different.
Yeah, no, I think there's an interesting kind of Luddite moment here, whereby, are the machines taking over, or are they freeing us to do more complex problems as well? So, Nitin, to you, and then a couple more questions here as we kind of wrap here. So, now I think as you think about, more and more institutionalizing and bringing some of these more agentic experiences with the basis of kind of precision context, what is the kind of what's that going to do for you as a company, as Marriott, in terms of changing the competitive landscape for you?
So I think I kind of feel that these precision agents would be, the kind of new norm itself, right? And I'm just going back to the, the initial discussion we had about, one size fit all, right? So that's not gonna last longer, right? Because every company is kind of unique. So think about, right, like, as like every human has a different DNA. So that means every company has a different DNA. So you cannot just have, one solution that kind of fit everything and kind of solve those problems. And I think as we are kind of progressing in this space, we will be able to, we are going to actually see more and more of these small language models, which kind of be very fine-tuned on your specific data, your policies, understand your customer behavior, and then kind of act or, take initiatives and then kind of be able to, create new things as well. So I kind of had that in like we are also kind of thinking that, these small language models would kind of spread across the business operations, and they are actually being, helping the associates in getting more productive, taking the work which is kind of monotonous or does not add, or kind of very repetitive, and be able to focus on, kind of giving the associates time to kind of focus on solving the problems or delighting the customers, like the example that you gave, right? So if I have an agent which kind of take cares of, say, the late checkout request, I have the associate on the front desk, they can actually be able to talk more about, kind of make a human connection with the customer. Hey, how's your trip? Or maybe I can recommend some places around here, rather than actually trying to see the schedule and see, okay, how I can kind of accommodate that request.
That's great. I love that. Now, I think it's really interesting to from the conversation here. We touched on an awful lot, both technical, so people, process, perspectives. But I think I also recognize many of our audience and each of us here on this call are in different stages of our journey for where AI is going to provide an impact. How it can deliver that perspectives and deliver impact to the business. But let's kind of wrap with from our experiences and what we're projecting for, because I think, Ankit, you are right on the money when and if we do this a year from now, we're going to have a wildly different conversation, and that's an exciting itself. But what advice do you have, right? So for those perspectives where that you would give executives today who are just kind of starting that journey to AI. So I think we've all learned a lot, already. What's your perspective? The top 3 things you would say to think about as they start that journey, and then Nitin, I'll let you wrap before we can bring this to a close. So Ankit, starting with you.
So I would say, I think what would be my advice? I think my advice would be not to consider the end-to-end problem versus just a point problem, because and for all the reasons we've talked about earlier, so I won't rehash those. But so really look at the challenges end to end and see how you can either reimagine that using the current technologies, and then related to that is really looking at the readiness of your data infrastructure to support it. So don't just assume if you have the next best idea, you can actually get it implemented, while you might not have what you said, even Jonathan earlier, right? That you can put an agent up, but if you didn't have the right either metadata or semantic layer, and now your agent doesn't actually know how to think about counterparties because they're called slightly differently in different parts of the company, and now you're actually confusing the customer versus helping them. So don't underestimate the maturity of your data infrastructure, and make sure that's prioritized with it. And then third is really just balance the risk with it, right? That there's a lot of unknown here, and so when we don't know how this is actually going to go, then we get very risk averse. While being super risk averse doesn't help in moving fast either. So you got to balance out the risk and reward in this. So just being more pragmatic about that equation as well.
And Nitin, I'll give you the last word on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think where like the advice I would definitely give is like, so there is no perfect time or a perfect plan, right? So, and you don't have to wait for the perfect technology, because this is kind of a moving target, and things are moving so fast that you cannot just say, oh, once this is like rock solid, then only I'm gonna be implementing it, right? So I think it's very much about you have to start now, you have to learn, and then kind of adjust. So the 3 areas I would say, definitely start small. Don't try to just boil the ocean, right? Because every business have like millions of problems to solve. So I would say focus on with the problems, like 1 or 2 problems which you think are simpler to solve rather than complex. And then once you kind of build something for those simpler problems, you kind of learn from those findings. And then once you kind of learn, you kind of be able to scale it as well, right? So the scaling comes later part. First is actually learning part, right? When you are actually doing, picking up small use cases and trying to solve and kind of learn it. And then the last part, I would say the governance, right? That is like the heart of this whole process, right? Because if you are thinking that, okay, I can build a solution and kind of deploy it, and then maybe, as a checkbox, I can say, oh, we have the governance, you are absolutely right, wrong on that, right? So governance piece, I would say, will always be, starting when you are actually discussing about a problem statement, like how you kind of put in the governance, how you can put in the guardrails, what is the metadata, all of those things has to be right from the beginning rather than the end. So I think the focus, the governance, and then the scale, I would say definitely is the key for, being successful in this journey, I would say.
That's great. Well, listen, right of the money here. Thank you, Ankit. Thank you, Nitin, for your amazing perspectives. I'm delighted in answering questions from all over the world. And thank you to CDO Magazine for inviting us all today to share our perspectives. I will wrap it here. Have a wonderful Thursday. Happy Thursday. Safe weekend to all. And thank you all.
Thank you. It was
Thank
great to
you.
be here.